welcome to Neurodiverse Generation, the podcast where we flip the script on what it means to thrive through neurodiversity. I'm your host, Jenna Evelyn, and today we're diving headfirst into the quirks, creativity, and challenges of the neurodiverse experience. Whether you're here to laugh, learn, or find a little inspiration, you've found your people. Please note that this program may not be suitable for younger viewers due to explicit language and mature themes. Parental guidance is advised. This show is aired for educational purposes. We are not licensed diagnosticians or counselors. Let's get the conversation rolling. My first guest for today is Kyle, a 28-year-old self-published author from Mitchell's Plain on the Cape Flats in South Africa. He is a born-again Christian, a biologist, former teacher, and published author of 16 novels. He holds a master's degree in molecular biology and has recently completed an MSc degree. Kyle taught maths, geography, and life orientation at a high school in Hanover Park, where he completed his schooling with 6 distinctions. His more recent venture is hosting book writing, publishing, and marketing masterclasses to impart his experiential knowledge to fellow budding authors. My second guest today, Kim Vermaak, is also known as the Mindset Whisperer for Legacy A. She is a book coach, publisher, speaker, and novelist with a growing global fan base. She has also written books for coaches, leaders, and other aspiring authors who finally want to get their book out into the world. This author believes that only stories that truly touch the hearts of others will ever leave a lasting impact and help those who write them to leave a legacy. I've been really looking forward to this conversation because I think that there's a lot of creativity that goes into this process, and there's a different inspirational process depending on which way you go, right? So I really feel writing a book is an act of vulnerability. It's like laying one's thoughts bare, right, for the world to see, regardless of whatever perceived judgment could come your way. So can you both tell me a little bit about yourselves as creatives and as coaches in the business of inspiring others in this way?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jantjies. I'm a fantasy author, a speaker, and a book coach. So I write fantasy novels. I have 16 books currently out. I speak on creativity and innovation. And then I help people write their books within 6 months or less. That is my goal when I work with people. I started writing in 2013, my first book. It took me 7 years to get published. So I finally published in 2020. In 2021, I had a goal to write and publish 10 books in 1 year. Only managed to do 9 because I was exhausted, but I got it out.
Good for you. I love how he's like, I only managed.
The goal was 10. I published that 9th book on 31st December 2021.
Dang.
So on the dot. So that was the goal. Just made it to 9. And now I help other people write their books because I've seen, how it is. How hard it can be to write books. Not just how hard it is to write, but how hard it is to write books that sell. That's the way it is. So that's what I try to do. So yeah, that are things about me.
Okay, tell us a little bit about you, Kim.
Yes, I am an author, that's why I'm here. So I write fantasy, medieval fantasy, and then I also write non-fiction books specifically for authors, so guides and that kind of thing. At the moment, I'm writing an interesting hybrid book called Dangerous Words, which is a novel that's aimed at authors, but in it I have some of the marketing and networking techniques that authors can work with to amplify their career. And I was inspired by the book The 1 Minute Millionaire, because they have got business principles in a novel there. I typically don't finish reading nonfiction books. because I think to myself, well, I studied for 4 years, I'm so over textbooks. But if it is quite anecdotal and that kind of thing, then I find it more engaging and I'm more likely to finish a book from that perspective. And that's generally the approach that I take when it comes to the authors that I coach. I want to have their heart and soul come out into the book that's recognizable to people, so people can say, I resonate with that. I recognize that particular problem. And it just makes the nonfiction books a lot more engaging for the readers.
For sure. It almost reminds me of like chicken soup for the soul type of a thing. I love those. I was reading all those old books growing up though, but I find it so interesting, or not interesting, really valuable, in fact, that you both place a lot of emphasis and a lot of intentionality on the earning side of being an author and doing that intentionally through your writing, because that impacts everything, I think. So Kyle, I'm very curious to know, when you have been working with neurodiverse authors, do you see a difference in how they approach fiction versus nonfiction? How does neurodiversity shape the storytelling process in these genres?
Well, with regards to how do they approach fiction versus non-fiction, with fiction, authors are a lot more, for example, I worked with this, let me use examples rather, it's better, easier to explain. I worked with this girl who has autism. So this was just a short session at the library that I was doing a project with. And she focused a lot on detail. So that was something that I found very interesting, especially because it's world building. If you're doing fantasy, there's a lot of world building that takes place.
It's incredibly descriptive, right?
Yeah. So she focused a lot on detail, which is obviously an excellent thing to do. But the struggle then again with her was that she grew tired quickly.
Yes.
So she couldn't write a lot very quickly. So she'd write small paragraphs, but those paragraphs were incredibly detailed. Whereas I would write a large section, and then in my editing phase, I would come back and add detail. With her, it was detail. It was so easy for her to do the detail. And when it comes to nonfiction, you see the same sort of thing, but the detail will be more as in facts, research, studies that they've found out, those kinds of things that they will put
empirical
a lot of
evidence.
Yes. So it depends. So when it comes to small, minute things, that's where I found they really thrive. But I just need to learn how to manage them better with regards to time and how long they can actually work on. Yes.
Oh, that energy management is such a massive part of neurodiversity and of book writing as two completely separate fields. Kim, how do you help neurodiverse authors find their authentic voice in writing, whether they're telling their own story or creating entirely new worlds?
So the challenge is that I found that neurodiversity authors kind of tend to be all over the place.
Oh,
and it's like
I feel so called out.
So I stumbled upon this purely by accident because I like to have some structure and some order in my writing process. For me, it's better for me to just sit and absolutely just write it out and say, this time blocking, this is the time that I need to work. But you'll hear things that people were saying, like, I feel like I'm drinking out of a fire hose. And then they've got like this, and then this idea comes up and that idea, and they run after those ideas, and you're like, can we just finish the book? So it's frustrating for them, and it can be very frustrating for the book coach as well. It's even more frustrating for us because sometimes you feel a little bit like a parent, and that you can see the potential inside the author, and then they're like, write the book, damn it.
And it's withholding those neurodiverse individuals accountable, right? That's quite a difficult balance to find as a professional in the industry.
Now, what happens is that when I sit with my coaching clients, we will then workshop an aspect of the book, and then I get the buy-in straight away because they're in the moment, they're in the energy, and they're like, yes, it makes perfect sense to me. And then I'm, yay, and I will see you next month, and on Friday, remember to send in your workout, and then nothing happens, and I'm like, what the heck? But what I found is the one appointment, I actually was ready to say to my client, okay, I understand that, like, you're just not going to be able to write this book at all. And when we sat down in the meeting and we started working through this stuff, and I said, you know what, I'm locking you inside this boardroom. I'm going to go downstairs. I'm going to go get, like, order the tea for us and whatever. And you are going to sit here and you're going to write. And then I'm going to come up and I'm going to check on you. The words started coming out. She actually got some structure. Then we spoke the story through and we're like, this is what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. And so I'm feeling that with my neurodiversity clients, the better way of doing it is not necessarily to try and enforce a specific writing time for them. When they have the meeting, is to have a longer meeting. So I typically would have an hour with the person, rather have 2 hours, do the first part, the workshop part, and then the next part just say, you're going to sit here and you're going to write, because then we can get that kind of hyper focus thing that neurodiversity people love, and like just like kill it in the session there, that you walk out and you say, I have achieved that. Because one of the things that I also notice is when they're not achieving what they set out to achieve, they get a lot of anxiety about it.
Yes,
a lot
and
of
guilt.
shame, condemnation, yes, guilt. All of those emotions start playing up. And when those emotions are at play, you actually cannot be creative. So, yeah, so that's, you know, I usually have a thing where I say, what is lifestyle like for you? And we do an assessment from that perspective. But I'm wanting to do an additional assessment with my clients and say, describe these kinds of feelings, so that I can get a feel for, at the beginning of the coaching program, if they are neurodiverse, because then we switch the way we're going to work. I've got one client at the moment that used to be a rowing coach. You know, when you're rowing, you're just like backwards, forwards, you go into rhythm. And as I see how he's working, I can see his training come in there. So we, as coaches, as book coaches, we need to do a little bit more time in the beginning to discover what kind of triggers our clients have, so that we can work with that.
But I love, that is so, so beautifully phrased. The importance of creating a sense of achievement, and in realizing that because we struggle to hold ourselves accountable, it's really just in kicking out those negative emotions, kicking out that anxiety and that paralysis, to get things moving with these intervals in between, where one can kind of capitalize on that creativity. I love that strategy, Kim. Oh my gosh, that's brilliant. You should create courses on this. You really could. You could write a book on writing for the neurodiverse. Imagine that. How can neurodiverse authors contribute to more accurate and nuanced representation of neurodiversity in literature? Because I think, just like, you know, your TV, radio, I don't know how many people still listen to radio, it's become podcasts now, I guess. But the way that these things are discussed and the way that these things are put across, particularly artistically, can be quite influential.
For me, I think it would be best then with regards to fiction, because as a writer, I can only write what I personally experience from my own experience. I can try and imagine and put myself in someone else's shoes, but it's going to be so much more authentic if it is someone who's already experienced that. So if a neurodiverse author starts writing a fantasy or whatever fictional novel they want to write, and they put a character in that describes them or what their struggles in are, that person, because they can build that character perfectly up, that character can become a favorite So, you know, like in
Yes.
in books and in movies that you have your favorite side character, you have your favorite main character, whoever.
And what
That
makes them
person
our
can become a
favorites is
character.
that depth, right? The depth that those
Exactly.
characters possess.
One thing that I teach people is if you're going to do, if you're going to, you have to put a lot of effort into your side characters.
Ah,
Not, so what I do is we do like not side arcs, side missions, where it builds up the main story, but at the same time, it also builds up your side characters and it fleshes them out perfectly. You find out more about them. And if you can have a neurodiverse character and you can flesh that person perfectly out, show the struggles that they go through, show how they think, all those kinds of things that make them who they are, that authenticity of them. I think that will make that person become so much of a beloved character and spread
yes.
that message out.
And it can be incredibly useful, I think, in humanizing it.
Yes, especially if
Kim,
you're
what
gonna
would...
advertise it to schools.
Yes, 100%. Oh my gosh. Oh, I love that thinking. I love that thinking.
Yeah.
Carl's always, we always oriented towards let's see.
I was
We know what we love to do, but let's see how we can monetize it as well. Because us creatives tend to get carried away with our work,
yeah.
and then it ends up being devalued in ways that feel very personal, but they're not.
I was at a primary school this morning because I'm working on a project with them. Um,
Okay.
And one of the things that I told them is that when you have children that read fantasy, they are less prone to bullying, because with fantasy you have so many different kinds of characters, and the people who read them have to be open enough to accept that there's different characters with different traits, with different emotions, who operate differently, with different cultures. So people who
Yes.
read fantasy usually they don't bully as much as other people, and they're a lot more accepting. They're more empathetic, and if you can have it now neurodiversity in there, they'll accept that easier also.
And I know that there are also then links to both reading and writing creatively, whether that's
Yeah.
fantasy fiction, whatever, with a higher EQ and a development of a higher EQ throughout childhood. Kim, how would you say, what are some strategies you would suggest for this?
So when I started writing, one of the best bits of advice that I got is that there are no one-dimensional villains in life. So even if you're writing about a bad person, a bad situation, a bad diagnosis or whatever, there's always the flip side of it.
Oh,
And
Kim has entered her villain era. Yes.
Like what the flip side of that is. So, like for argument's sake, in my medieval fantasy book, my villain is King Raldolph. And he is a womanizer. You'll often see a row of heads that he's popped onto walls, but he's got this thing for children. We don't hurt children. So we can go torture and murder and do whatever, but we don't hurt children. And so because of that, there has to be an element that you're like, he did a good thing over there. Now, what happens with neurodiversity is that when you're coming out from a school perspective, the neurodiversity is treated like the villain. So teachers are like, that child is so disruptive, they've got this problem, chuck them onto Ritalin, we can't teach in an environment like this. And then they try and force the child into a certain way of being. So what you have to do is you're going to say there's no one-dimensional condition. On the flip side of this, what does the neurodiversity child bring to the classroom? Do they bring excitement? Do they bring different ideas? That kind of thing. And start fleshing it out from that perspective and see how you can draw on the strengths of the child that they become an asset to the teacher. It could be that they've got so many ideas that you could be sitting in a classroom situation and you can say to the neurodiverse child, you are the person who's going to fire off different ideas for debates and that kind of thing. Now, bringing it back to writing, I say to my students, show, don't tell. So you don't say, oh, I'm suffering from anxiety. You don't say, I found it really difficult to do this particular section. I'll say to them, go to YouTube, watch scenes. I'll say, can I see scenes on, the saddest movies, or the most courageous escape from prison or whatever? And then you sit with a
Yes.
notebook and you write down every movement that they do that shows you how they're feeling. So do the eyes get down? Are the shoulders hunched? You use words to describe what's going on. Now, when you're writing about a neurodiversity character, if they're feeling anxious, are their eyes like darting around? Do they have like rapid hand gestures? How does
That's
the anxiety,
powerful.
do the lights flicker? You've got to create the scene. And then what you say, okay, this is how my character responds in situations visually that other people can see the cues. This is how they're feeling, create the inner dialogue, but then create the hero side of it. So you and I were chatting recently about, and I think your mom was also mentioning about how many entrepreneurs, how many creative people have got neurodiversity issues. When we say it's just ADHD, then it's a problem. You have to say, celebrate the wins of those people, that they can see what they're bringing in. And I don't believe that you only have to be neurodiverse in order to recognize it. What you have to have is you have a desire to learn and understand. Your talk that you did at the PSA convention early on this year, that gave visual stimulus that people could say, I now understand. And so instead of complaining, oh, neurodiversity people are not represented enough and whatever, bring your gift to the world and show it. Don't just tell, show it to us what it looks like, so that the rest of the world can understand and incorporate those people into mainstream media.
I think that also shows such an immense appreciation for the fact that in book writing, you aren't just using words in the conventional sense that we understand them. You're using them to explain and to describe the body language, these other things that are such a massive part of our communication and in the way we pick up information from one another. I know that so well as someone who has developed a million different social scripts to copy and paste across, socially accepted conversations. And making that decision to unmask consciously, particularly in episodes like this and in my writing, it's at times been quite challenging, and at times I still fight that urge to say, oh, I'm sorry. I'm trying to train myself not to say sorry and to just unmask, and to, if I get a weird look, I can explain where it comes from. But instead of it shouldn't be something that I see as a cripple, because it isn't. It really is just different.
My new book that I'm working on, it's called, well, I don't like the name anyway, so I'll change the name probably, so I won't say the name. But it's about these animals, anthropomorphic animals that can use weapons and things, so they know. But what I have it is that every major animal has some sort of sickness in them, right?
Wow.
Where like lions, they have pride, and they have to do something that defends their pride. Eagles have foresight, where they don't care what's happening currently in the moment. They just want to look ahead. And one of the villains is a crocodile, and he has a sort of a thing called crocodile rage, where he's not a bad guy at all when he's with good guys. So he has basically two advisors. One advisor is the good advisor, like the angel on his shoulder. And whenever he's with this advisor, he's one of the best kings and everybody respects him. He does the right thing. When he's with the other advisor who just wants him to go to war, then he's this ruthless kind of a beast.
Dictator.
It's just pure carnality, And I'm thinking in terms of neurodiversity, that where you can show those different layers to people in your writing, show what they how their minds are operating, what they're thinking about, What is the things that influence their thinking? Because I've
And
seen
that there's
some
duality, right?
yes, there's duality. I played with this autistic little girl the other day. It was the first time I met her, and the mother was so surprised that she was playing with me, because she doesn't play with anyone. Um, and you can find out this how children think, how people with neurodiverse, how they actually relate to people, and what specifically is it that draws them to certain people. So I think that's also a great thing to look at.
Oh, I love that. Oh, we're dropping bars today, guys. Kyle, do you think there's enough representation of neurodiverse characters in contemporary fiction and nonfiction?
I would say both yes and no. Um, no, because I don't see it as often as I should. But then again, yes, because ever since I started learning about neurodiversity, I've actually started realizing, okay, this character does actually have some sort of neurodiversity in them. Like for example, in the past, I would never have considered Tony Stark, Iron Man, to be a
Yes,
neurodiverse person. Currently,
great
now I'm thinking
example.
neurodiverse because I'm studying what neurodiversity is and I'm understanding what it is. So now, because I have that understanding, I can actually identify, oh, okay, this is what it is. Yes. So it might be that there is representation, we just don't have the understanding of what it is.
And you can recognize, I think, those the strengths that come alongside it as well, which is just beautiful, because a lot of the time we look at our eccentric friends and our, you know, and we're like, oh, they're quirky, you know, and recognizing the duality in that neurodiverse experience can be an incredibly powerful tool in putting that across. Kim, how do you think neurodiverse authors can help fill in those gaps?
I think that naming what it is. So sometimes, you know, when I was at Alison's book launch recently, she was mentioning that her father had bipolar, and the stigma of having a condition almost killed him because he didn't want people to know, and therefore he didn't want to take his medication. We've got a big issue at the moment with kids that are cutting themselves, or the increase in you know, in suicide with young people, and it's because primarily shame. We've got shame packed on us. We don't know how to decompress, how to deal with those kinds of things. But when you are an author and you're writing about things, to name it. Now, I'm always a little bit skeptical of over-diagnosing everything. So, like, you know, sometimes when people suffer from depression, sometimes they're just having a bad day and they don't realize that lots of people have bad days, and having a bad season in your life, or a couple of bad things happening to you, doesn't mean that you are suffering from depression. It means that you are struggling to cope with the season that you're going through. So overdiagnosing is always, I think, too much of a cop-out. But what happens is, if you genuinely have got a condition, is to name it so that it normalizes it to a certain degree. So, like, for argument's sake, I'm an epileptic, so I don't go broadcasting it to everyone, but now I am broadcasting it to everyone.
Technically, I am. I can cut it out if you want.
But I have a trip that's coming up, and I had to say to my travel companion, because he's saying, let's fly through the night, get there early in the morning, and then just start, you know, start going and visiting the castles of the world that we want to visit, because, you know, we can rest when we get back to Johannesburg. So I'm like, okay, I'm all for that, but I just need you to understand that I'm an epileptic, and one of my triggers is lack of sleep, and that could tip me over. So I said, so I've self-managed my condition for over 22 years without medication, but it meant learning to understand my body
Mm.
and telling people that I have an issue, because my very first seizure I ever had was in the subways of London on my first international trip. So when I was discussing, now I'm 52 years old, I was 21 then. That was when I had my very first seizure. And I'd had symptoms of it, but I didn't know what it was. Like I used to see little stars and things. And as a child, I thought they were the fairies coming to visit me. And I'd like, hello, fairies. Then when I got diagnosed at 21, when I saw the stars, I then had anxiety and fear, like, oh my word, I'm going to have a seizure again. And that the fear would just spike. And then the one day I said, stuff that now. I'm just going to see them as fairies. And I'm like, hello. So I used to do that. It changed my state and I calmed down and I was able to manage things better. But I had to say to my travel companion, listen, I've got epilepsy. What's going to happen is when I get there, if I say to you, I am tired, let me rest. Because otherwise we're going to be in hospital that first night, and I don't want that to happen. It was terrifying when I had the first seizures for other people, because I woke up on the ground. I looked at the people that were around me. The paramedic said hello. And he said, do you know what your name is? And I started laughing. And I said, of course I know what my name is. And he said, can you please tell it to me? And I looked at him. I looked at the two men standing over me who I could see knew me. They recognized me, but I had no idea who they were. And I spent my very first night in the UK in a hospital, and the guy next to me was a convict, and he escaped out the window in the bathroom that night. So that was my first travel experience.
Wow, what a plot twist. Okay, cliffhanger. This was such a beautiful example though of like one of those stories that can humanize these experiences, right? And I'm picking up a common thread throughout what both of you are putting across here, in that words have an incredibly stabilizing factor if they're used right, in the context that the way that we talk about conditions can, the way that we talk about them, the way that we describe them, the way that we put them across can hugely influence people's capacity to embrace it and therefore divulge that information for themselves as and where it's appropriate, making those aspects of life a little bit easier. So words can balance out both of those sides of it just through perspective. That's very, very interesting.
Can I just add this one thing, which is quite interesting? As I got diagnosed in London, but the guy said, I'm not putting it onto your forms because the stigma is going to follow you. I'm just going to say seizure due to, to lack of sleep or whatever. So he said, so when you get to South Africa, have another test with your doctor and let them give you the diagnosis if necessary. And so my neurologist said this to me. He said to me, you can take this condition and you can look at it from a number of different aspects. He said, but I have to tell you that some of my patients who got epilepsy are healthier than a lot of other people. So I said, well, how the heck does that work? So he says, because when you learn to read your body, you're going to realize triggers. And when the triggers come through, you're going to have to make a decision. I need to rest more. So he was saying alcohol swells up the brain. From a female perspective, when a woman is still in her reproductive cycle, just beforehand, it also swells the brain. Stress, a whole bunch of things. So he says, and if all of these things happen at the same time, you've got a higher risk of having a seizure. So when you're finding so many of those things, then you've got to say, I am going to sleep better this week because I know I've got a potential trigger coming up. And he says, and you will exercise and you will do all of these things. He gave me all of these life management things. And he says, so other people that don't have these conditions and haven't learned to manage their lifestyle, the first warning that they've got a health condition is when they have a heart attack, when this and this happens. But neurodiversity people, if they manage it correctly, can be healthier and live longer than those people who have no warnings that they have to take care of their body.
Wow, I love that. I love that. And that actually leads on to my next question for you, Kim. But before I get there, Kyle, I would like to know, what are your thoughts on the relationship between neurodivergence and creativity? Have you noticed patterns or traits in neurodiverse writers that helped them to foster that through that inspirational process?
Oh, that's a tough question. Personally, I have not noticed that actually. I don't want to lie on your podcast. So I haven't noticed it. I spoke just on Friday on creativity and how creativity is how you can build yourself to be more creative. And one of the things that I said was that creativity is a combination of your experiences. So the more you are able to, the more experiences you have, and the different types of experiences you have, and the way that you combine them, that's what makes you more creative. So just in terms of that, I would say that if you are neurodiverse and you obviously have your own experiences that other people don't have, that is something that will be so unique to that person, because that 99% of the world will not have that experience that you are having. And that's where their creativity comes in, because they now have an ingredient to add into the meal, whatever they are creating, that other people do not have. Exactly. Because if I'm cooking with something that you don't have, I have an ingredient that you don't have, it's going to make my meal completely unique and authentic. So in terms of that, where neurodiverse people have these experiences that other people don't have, and they use their creativity to combine all these ingredients and experiences in their life, that's where the strength lies. They need to be able to embrace that experience and put it out there as something that is authentic and unique. Don't leave that that ingredient on the counter, because that's the one thing that other people don't have. That's what I would say to people who are writing, especially if they neurodiverse.
I think it's particularly interesting what you said in the context that creativity isn't like something that's purely for the neurodiverse. It's not a neurodiverse, owned strength. It's a human thing. But creativity, if anything, is like a neurodivergence language, right? So it's more about utilizing that creativity to almost package your experience, that unique trait, into something you can sell, something that can impact other people.
And what people don't realize is you can actually build yourself to be creative. I know a lot of people think, oh no, you were born with that creativity. You can build yourself to be creative by getting new experiences. So let's say you and I go on a hike together. The way I experience that hike is completely different to the way you experience that hike.
Completely.
And so the way that we're going to take that experience and put that into our lives and build it up, our creativity is going to be completely different. So if you are neurodiverse and you want to be more creative, the trick is go and have more experiences. Go to a restaurant that you've never gone to before. Go to a beach you've never gone to before. Climb a mountain, speak to people, read more books, have whatever kind of experiences you can have and put that into your life, because the way that you experience it is going to be very different from the way someone else experiences it. The trick is that you have that unique thing about you that other people don't have.
And it's in that packaging that you create authenticity. Love that. Exactly. I love that. Kim, like following off of what you were saying a moment ago, How do you coach neurodiverse writers to manage their time and productivity while allowing space for creative bursts and periods of rest? So aside from your techniques where you bring them in for their meeting and they've got to do something right then and there, is there anything practical that you kind of send them back with, like along with that sense of accountability and that renewed creativity that can perpetuate this?
Okay, so I always say you must prepare for creativity because it is going to come. But sometimes it comes in the most flippant inconvenient time. I once was in the shower, and that's where I relax. I relax in the shower, like nice
Yes.
hot showers. And this character pops into my brain. And I looked up and I said, "You're kidding me. I just got in the shower." So
And then
one
it's
of
like,
the things that
but you don't want to lose it, so you'll jump out and write it down, you know?
it was just so rude. I mean, creativity has got no manners at all. So what I say is get a whole bunch of notebooks and pens, put them all over the place. You know, put one in the kitchen cupboard, put one in the bathroom cupboard, put it in the cubby hole of your car, put it on your bedside table. Bedside table is a really good place because the darn ideas sometimes come in the middle of the night, which is also very rude. So when you've got it there, then that means you can just start jotting it down. If you've got the budget for it, get yourself a Rocket book. So there are digital notebooks that come with a special pen, and you can upload the document into your Google Docs or whichever system you want to do, particularly because it can be a bit of a pain having to write the stuff, retype it once you've written it. So those are little hacks that you can use. And then also, you know, sometimes what happens is the refrigerator is a great thief of our creativity because you get distracted. So then you go to the fridge, and then when you've opened the fridge and you found whatever snack you want to have, then, oh, I need to do this, and oh, I need to do that. And you just spend a lot of time away from your desk. So I ask people to say, what are the foods that help you to focus? So try and stay away from stimulating foods like sugar and that kind of thing. And when you're going to sit down and write, make sure that you've got it with you. Choose music that helps to keep you in the zone. I mentioned to you the other day that when I am editing, I listen to soft rock music. And there are enough words to keep my brain kind of in this direction, but I still have enough space to focus. That's when I'm editing, because then I'm too familiar with the work, so I need a little bit of a distraction. But when I'm writing, then I listen to certain kinds of background music that doesn't have words, that my creativity can flow. So just learning to manage your state, and for each individual that looks different. So one of my clients, she likes to use incense and that. So I'll ask them questions. I'll say, when you are writing, when you're in the zone, tell me what your environment looks like. Where are you sitting? Are you sitting outside? What are you listening to? When are you in that state? So just like when I have got an epileptic episode and I recognize the triggers for me, you can also have creativity triggers. You can say, these are the things that I'm generally more creative with. Can I recreate that while I am writing?
And especially because like neurodivergents tend to be so sensitive to not necessarily tactile stuff, but all of our senses. Some of them are more powerful than others, but that explains why things like incense and that would be incredibly powerful motivators and triggers for that creativity to come out. So as a public service announcement for creativity, please get with the program and come at more convenient times. My Calendly link is available online.
You know, on that note of what Kim is saying, what I did in 2021 was when I wanted to write the 10 books. So my computer is in the lounge. I moved my computer to my room because in my room there's no Wi-Fi connection at all. So that means I can't use any internet. while I'm writing.
Big brain time.
I had to delete all the games on my computer because those were a big distraction to me. So all the games I had to delete, all the movies I had to delete. The only things I didn't delete were like motivational videos. So I kept those
Not
on.
the movies.
I had to. And then what I did was when I go sleep, if I go sleep, I leave the Word document open. So that if while I'm struggling to fall asleep, I get hit with that creativity, then I just jump up and then type something out quickly so I can remember it and then go lay again.
Yeah.
That was now for 2021. But then when I had to get back into the marketing phase, I had to move my computer back again because I needed the Wi-Fi and all that. But so that's just an example of what possible things it can do.
Yes, I love that practical, like meeting your brain where you are, right? And I found it interesting, actually, Kim, that you mentioned, and I know this scientifically, there's a lot of empirical evidence to back up why having like or eating stimulants can be incredibly, harmful for neurodivergence creativity in particular when it comes to our focus, right? I found, funnily enough, and it's like you say, it's because it's an individual experience, it's each to their own. But I found that if I concentrate the stimulants that I have to the times when I have to focus, they work as stimulants to help me focus. But that means I don't wake up every morning and have a cup of coffee. I don't have a cup of tea every single day. I try to avoid sugary foods in general, but I also know that if I've got to stay up like the whole night to work on I don't know, in high school it was an art portfolio, in varsity it's flippin' essays. But if I have to sit up all night and do something like that, then actually having a cup of coffee or something like that can really, really help me to trigger that creativity. I don't know if that's maybe because it's I don't know, maybe it's the Maverick in me. Oh, I love
I like
that.
writing at night
Okay.
when it's quiet.
Yes, I'm also
So
a night
yeah,
owl. I do some of my best work at
10
like 2
p.m.
o'clock
to
in the
2
morning.
a.m. That's my time.
Preach!
3 a.m.
Yes.
for me.
Thank you, Kim. You see, there's a commonality here, you guys. In other words, if you want to get creative, start working at 1 a.m. Okay. What advice, Kim, would you give to neurodiverse individuals who are just starting out in their writing journey, but struggle with traditional writing methods or schedules?
It's a difficult one because part of it actually is discipline. And I would say, be realistic. Say to yourself, and honesty, to me, honesty is the most important thing. Identify if you're not writing because you're scared, because you don't know what to say or how to start. Recognize that first, okay? Is it an excuse? Yeah, or is it a real thing? Because you don't want to be a victim by saying that some of the things that we're doing are choices that we've made, then that is more empowering. And so then you can say, I don't know what to do, so I need to get help. Or you could say, I'm overstimulated, and these are the things that I did yesterday, this morning, or whatever, that are adding to that, so that you can find out where your zone is. Do not subscribe to the thing that tomorrow is another day, because it's not another day.
Yeah.
It's a brand new day, and you would have lost out on opportunities. So you have to exercise your writing routine, and you've got to get into that space. It doesn't happen in one day. It's the same as riding a bicycle. You get on the bicycle, you're going to fall, you're going to stumble, and eventually you're going to get into your rhythm. And I was watching an episode recently from a woman who wrote a book about writing with ADHD. And she said it was terrible for her health and her mental health and everything. It just felt terrible. But what she had to do is she had to self-diagnose, and she had to say what serves me and what doesn't serve me. And you can only get that when you're honest with yourself, because then you need to know, is it medication that I need for a certain period of time? So what she did, And she said she took medication for only a certain period of time until she was able to build a routine. So the medication helped to calm her down, helped her to focus, and then her brain became used to, she trained her brain to write at a certain time of the day and just keep on going. Then she went off the medication because it had already served the purpose of training. So it's almost like when you go to gym and you get a personal instructor. The personal instructor doesn't need to be there every single time you go to gym. They can be, but an average personal instructor will say, I'll meet you this amount of times, and then from there, you can then start doing the exercises yourself because you know what to do. So come into the space knowing who you are, knowing why you are or are not writing, and then manage your life around that.
Oh, I love that. And it's also, that addresses the difficulty, I think, that neurodivergence face, in the sense that we kick against structure that's imposed on us, and yet we struggle with accountability and creating that structure for ourselves. And I've found, funnily enough, one of the easiest ways to address that is to break up tasks into slightly more bite-sized goals that still give me a sense of accomplishment along the way. For example, it's a stupid example and it's not related to writing, but it makes perfect sense. The laundry. Doing the laundry for me is not one task. It's 4. It's putting the laundry in, that's one task. Hanging the laundry up, that's another task. Taking the laundry down is a separate task. And then folding it / separating it into, ironing and sorting it, that's also another task. And I can't do them all in one go. Otherwise, it feels overwhelming. It feels like I'm trying to eat the elephant all in one go. And it's one of those stupid things that it's difficult to explain to someone who doesn't experience this, why doing the laundry is such an incredibly difficult task for me. But doing this makes it a little bit more manageable, particularly in terms of creating a routine for myself. That's really powerful.
One of the things that I can advise is start by writing short stories. A chapter in a book can be anything from 1,400 to 2,000 words. And I know there's some people say, you never make any money writing short stories or whatever, and I kind of beg to differ. I'm a mom and I have 3 children. One of them is luckily out the house. And there's an author that, I think it was James Patterson. He wrote a book called The 12 Red Herrings. And because I'm a mom, I struggle to read. I used to be, when I was younger, I would read a book in a weekend, but now you've got little people all over the place, and because I struggle a lot with sounds, to me, lots of sounds around me is overstimulus, and I just can't cope. But
auditory sensitivity.
Yes, I'm very, very sensitive. I actually get quite aggressive if there's multiple sounds around me, because you'll be speaking, but I'm aware of the fact that the gardener has arrived outside over there. I also know that my husband has just closed the door. There's all of these sounds that are all over, and I have to focus on the one thing. And so going back to the reading thing, I was struggling to finish a novel, and that was very frustrating for me because I just wanted to read something. I didn't want to be only writing all the time. And when I picked up this book, it was these short stories, and I could read one just before I started making supper. And it was satisfying because there was a beginning, a middle, and an end, and the story was over. And he wrote these 12 stories. And I thought to myself, they're absolutely brilliant. So I believe that if you are neurodiverse and you are struggling with the thought of the big book, then just write a whole series of short stories, put them into one thing. You then achieve something every single time you finish it. And if you're in a hyper-focused state, you can actually finish that entire story. You then get a dopamine lift because you're like, yay, I did it. And then if you're writing 12, 20, whatever, you get like all of that. And then that can show you that you can actually finish it. You can write a whole book, or you might decide, well, I'm only ever going to do short stories because that's what I can work with.
And it's awesome. It scratches the itch, right? I love that. I would love to know from the both of you, maybe Carl can start us off, how has working with neurodiverse authors changed your perspective on creativity and the writing process as a whole?
For me, it's been the type of thing where you learn that everything is not your way. You know what I mean? So when the way I do things is not the same way that everyone else will do things. And with each client, and with each client is different. With some of them, I can have a 4-hour session. Like a structuring session, I can have a 4-hour session. With some people, I can't have more than an hour. So it all depends on the person that I'm working with, what their schedule is also like, the way that they think, the way that they feel. It's very different per person. So you have to take it as a on a person by person basis. So I try with people who are neurodiverse. I try to keep sessions short. I don't want anything that is too long because obviously they get distracted quickly. But in that time, we're working. That's one thing that I can say that like in that session, I know there's not going to be a lot of distractions within that session. But as soon as that session is over, then I need to make sure I keep it within that hour and nothing further. Otherwise, it might take a while. If I give them homework, I don't let the homework be over a month long. So because I need to keep them focused. So with those kind of clients, I'll meet you at least once a week. Where with other clients, I can give you a longer piece of homework and I can tell you, okay, a month later, you can come back to me. This is what I expect. But with certain people, I need to have it every week because I need to keep you. There a lot of what I said. I made a post on Instagram that the second biggest thing, that the reason why people come for book coaches is for the accountability. That accountability just to keep them on track. I spoke with a lady just this morning who said she's been wanting to write a book for 2 decades and she hasn't gotten to it because she keeps getting distracted and things. So it's the accountability where you have to make sure that you know this person, what their struggles are, how they write, what's their scheduling like, how they feel, what can they handle? Can they handle 1 hour? Can they handle 4 hours? If you give them homework, can you give them long pieces or short pieces? So it all depends on that. Some people get overwhelmed if you meet with them every week. So for those people, meet with them once per month. So for my clients, it's basically on a person by person basis. I can't give you a set thing. This is how it's going to be.
No, of course.
Because for me, it's, I don't understand. Why can't you do this? This is how I do it. This is how everybody else I know does it. Why can't you do it? So that's something that you have to learn.
Oh, and there's also there's an importance there also on summarizing like the main points, because you actually made me think of something earlier when you were mentioning that incredible attention to detail that neurodivergents seem to possess in this creative process. I myself have experienced that to the extent that it impacts my studying process. I cannot study everything right down to the detail. If I try to study every single detail, I am going to go way off track in my explanations. I'm going to over explain everything, and I'm going to get far less marks than I would have if I just studied the summaries, because my brain is structured to take in the details on a read over in any case, and to incorporate those as and where it's contextually necessary. So that mindfulness, right, Kim, that it's so important in knowing your energy management, your time management, all of that. What would you say in answer to this, Kim?
So in terms of what I've learned, I've actually learned the two-way kind of thing. One of the things that I have learned personally is managing my own energy. So I'm very structured in how I communicate with my clients. I can't do the weekly thing. A lot of the clients that I work are writing deeply personal encounters, and they take a lot of emotion. I mean, it's not unusual for me to be crying in a session because they've dealt with incredibly traumatic things. My mother used to say to me that I should have been a psychologist because I feel people's emotions very deeply. And so I said to her, no, I can't do that because I just been dealing with people's problems all the time. And then I became a book coach.
You take it home.
Yes, that's an informal therapy. So what I do is I meet with them once a month, and then once a month we have a group writing session where we share some of our writing. We learn from each other. I participate in that session as well. I'm also writing so that they can see me as a real author. Because you get some book coaches that just not actually publishing at all, and that's all that they're doing. So I bear the struggle of writing with them. But the other thing that I have learned, and so that self-care is very important for me. Just today, I took out Wednesday completely. I don't want to see anyone do anything. I'm going to be doing stuff that's important to me, because when I am full, I can help other people. It's like if your petrol tank is empty, you can't drive to Cape Town as much as you want to. And so when I read their work and I read the real personal things that happen to them, I have to have an off button to help myself decompress so that I can help them. The other thing is that I use my coaching sessions and my neurodiversity clients to find ways to help them. So I think when you and I chatted the other day about neurodiversity, it was because I recognized that I had a client who's struggling with neurodiversity. And I thought that even though I do have elements of that in my personality, I don't have a formal diagnosis. I haven't really even considered that option. Some people only get diagnosed when they're in their late 40s or 50s. And those people that I've come across who are functional in terms of their neurodiversity, they've learned coping mechanisms that some people who have had the benefit of medication from very early on in life haven't learned those coping mechanisms. And so when I looked at it, I thought, who can I speak to that can help me to not only better understand my clients, but can help my clients to better understand themselves? So that was a YouTube video for me. So that I can then show it to my clients, and then they can watch it and they can say, yes, that's me. I can learn from this lady. I also am going to be recording a video with a friend of mine who has a reputation management company, because one of my clients was saying, I'm too scared to continue with this book in case someone sues me for what I've said. Because it is true, but I don't want to have a backlash. Now, she's had some legal issues beforehand, which are completely unrelated. It was people that were not paying her for a service, and so that's got nothing to do with the writing thing, but the trauma from going through those legal proceedings is now stifling her. So I reached out to my friend and I said, what are the challenges that you can chat to me about in terms of reputation management? And that will create another video tutorial for my clients so they can, because it just so happens that in the same week, I had 2 clients that asked me the same question, reputation, if I write about this, am I going to have a backlash? So I find that with whatever client you're working with, whether they've got neurodiversity or any other issue, is to have a curious mind, to keep on learning and ask questions. Is there something that's come out of this session that other people can learn from?
Absolutely. You're establishing a need there, right? And you cannot pour from an empty cup. There's no way. So I love your outlook on this, both of you. I've had so much fun in this conversation. Thank you so much for your wisdom, your insights, and for everyone who's listening, please tune in next week for another episode, same time.